Hey peeps, welcome back. In today's video, we will be diving back into the world of real-life trains and railways. This time, we shall discuss all about Indian Railways. I want to explore its history, railway structure, services, and share thoughts on some of my favorite steam locomotives from there. I've decided that I'm going to take the same route I did in my Durango and Silverton Railroad video last year and do an overall analysis of the operating life on this railway network, talking about background, engines, and all. Happy to finally get this idea into execution since late December. It's been on the video list since, well, really ever since after my Durango and Silverton project. For that inspired your girl to look at more international railways outside of America and Britain. And for some strange reason, Indian Railways has grown into my curiosity these past few months. So I'll start with them first. So without further ado, let's not waste any more time and dive in. As always, we'll start with the beginnings. The starting life of Indian Railways dates all the way back to 1832 when the British administration proposed railroad tracks to run through the city of Madras, the capital of Tamil Nadu. For a minute, it stayed as an idea on paper before being put into action a few years later around 1835 to 1836. The first built tracks were laid in Chintadripet, I hope I'm saying that right, a locality near Madras and Red Hills by an engineer named Sir Arthur Cotton. A year later, in 1837, it officially became the first operating railroad in India known as the Red Hills Railroad. Its first industrial role was transporting granite to Madras for road construction. It ran for a few more years before unfortunately being closed in 1841 due to excessive costs of infrastructure as well as operational problems due to the collapsing of a canal quay, as the railroad relied heavily on water for canal services for transport. In 1845, the British founded two new privately owned companies called the Madras Railway and East Indian Railway, or EIR, with the former serving southern India and the latter serving northern and eastern India respectively. That same year, an agreement between the East Indian Railway and the Great Indian Peninsular Railway was carried out to construct a line running out of Bombay to Thane, with an extension towards Malay Ghat. In the early 1850s, work for the line from Bombay to Thane began, and on April 16th of 1853, it kick-started with its first ever passenger service consisting of 14 carriages with 400 passengers being hauled by 3 steam locomotives. More on the locos later. The success of this line led to more launches of railways in the eastern and southern regions. By 1860, a total of 8 railway companies were established, including the EIR, GIPR, Madras, and the Bombay and Central Indian Railway. Throughout that decade, 2 new lines called the Calcutta-Delhi and the Allahabad-Jabalpur line were opened, and in 1869, the GIPR had linked with these lines to create 4,000 miles of tracks spanning the country. By 1880, the network's length reached 9,000 miles. The 1890s saw the country eventually having their own fleet of locos and the progressing in passenger amenities. In 1901, the railways finally started to make profit, and in 1907, the government had purchased and leased all the major railway lines. During World War I, production on Indian Rail was abandoned to meet British requirements, and while the end of the war left the network in disrepair, the EIR and GIPR were nationalized in 1923. A year later, the railway received its first budget, and come February of 1925, the first ever electric train services began running between Bombay and Kerala. By the end of the 20s, the network had reached a high length of 66,000 kilometers, with millions of passengers and goods being carried yearly. Come the 40s, however, the last days of the British Raj were approaching. Management over these railway companies were later controlled by the government. Later in the decade, with Britain leaving, the nation split in two. More than 40% of the network was lost due to the new, at the time, Pakistan. In 1950, the number of length grew to 55,000 kilometers, with around 42 companies operating it. In December that same year, Indian Railways was reorganized into 6 zones by the Central Advisory Committee, with 3 being formed a short time later. Throughout the following years, Indian Railways was receiving diesel engines and continued improving with more modern amenities. Later in the 60s, the first batch of containerized freight started to run between Bombay and Ahmedabad, as well as a new express service that could reach up to 120 kilometers per hour, with this being the Rajdhani Express. As the century came to an end, Indian Railways was approaching its modernization period. Starting in the 80s, energy crises from the 70s became beneficial for the electrification of more and modern electric train services. The first metro system opened in 84. Alas, also in the 80s, the age of steam completely died out. Web-wise, Indian Railways brought in its online reservation system in 85, which allowed passengers to reserve and cancel for any trains with any terminal. This system would soon extend outwards over time. In the 90s, after a brief prevention of the network's growth by economic stillness, the Konkan Railway was opened, connecting the western region of India to various other parts of the country. Since the start of the 21st century, more metro stations have appeared in major cities, and their online reservation system evolved for the better. Throughout the 2010s decade, the network continued to make many changes across its infrastructure, including presenting more high-speed services, doubling track, and forming other things like GPS tracking of trains and fire alarm systems for air-conditioned coaches. Eventually, Indian Railways would send out compressed natural gas trains starting in 2015. In 2017, they made the decision to electrify its entire network, which was put into action by around 2022. As of today, Indian Railways holds the record as one of the world's most largest rail networks, specifically the fourth, with over 120,000 kilometers of track in total. As for the future, they are planning to fully turn into a net zero carbon emissions railway by the year 2030. They have already started actions on this goal by applying preservation of rainwater at their stations, reforestation, solar and wind-powered facilities, and solar-powered trains. As an environmental lover myself, all I can say is kudos to them. Before I go any further, I want to now take a chance to briefly look at, well, the railways of India. Now, there are a total of 19 railways stretching throughout the country. These railways are as follows: the Northern Railway, the Northeastern Railway, the Northeast Frontier Railway, the Eastern Railway, the Southeastern Railway, the South Central Railway, the Southern Railway, the Central Railway, the Western Railway, the Northwestern Railway, we wish, the Southwestern Railway, the West Central Railway, the North Central Railway, the Southeast Central Railway, the East Coast Railway, bear with me y'all, I'm almost done, the East Central Railway, the Konkan Railway, the Metro Railway Kolkata, and the most recent new one on the list, the South Coast Railway. Each railway operates as their own separate function. As I mentioned in the previous section, this began back during the late days of the World War II era, when any existing railway at that time was first ruled by the government. By 1951, they put this zone separation into action with the first 6 railways, thus forming 6 zones. These were the Southern Railway, Central Railway, and the Western Railway being the first 3, and the Northern Railway, Eastern Railway, and the Northeastern Railway following shortly after. I should mention that the Eastern Railway's predecessor was the Eastern Indian Railway prior to 1952. As the years rolled by, the government sought out to make more and more divided zones with these railways. Soon they had up to around 18 by the year 2010. It remained so for the past 16 years. As of recently this year in 2026, the 19th railway zone came into tuition with the South Coast Railway and has been in operation since June 1st. Now, I know that there are a lot of railway zones in India, and if I spend time talking about all of them, it will take all day, honestly. So I'll just briefly discuss the duties and services that some of these railways offer. We'll start with the Southern Railway since it was the first zone created. The SR's main duties are hosting passenger services such as the Shatabdi Express, Amrit Bharat Express, and the Tejas Express. This traffic on the SR runs more frequently than other kinds. Its freight jobs consist of mostly delivering coal to power stations, as well as oil, cement, and food materials. There's also a certain class of steam engine we may or may not recognize that operated on this railway, but we'll get to that later on. The Eastern Railway, previously the Eastern Indian Railway, is in charge of withholding the Howrah Junction and Sealdah Railway Junction, the 2 largest rail complexes in India. And aside from having a huge number of stations, it's responsible for still running Kalka Mail, India's oldest operating train service. The Northeast Frontier Railway and the Northwestern Railway, again we wish, both share in controlling many major city express trains, but the latter features things like medical facilities for employees and families, and training institutes for engineering studies. The Konkan Railway is useful by taking passengers to regions not accessible by rail, and holds a record of carrying 1.6 million trucks worth of freight in 2009. And I'll lastly bring up the South Coast Railway, which runs around 500 trains during its peak seasons and has the infrastructure of Wi-Fi stations that give internet access to urban and suburban areas. Once you get the overall picture of how when it comes to their train services or connections to different districts, each and every one of these railways are essential to the Indian railway structure. Whether it be passenger city runs or continuing growing records of freight goods, they are astounding at making sure they keep India's huge rail system going strong. Now let's take a glance at the locomotives of Indian railways. I'm gonna just get out of the way that IR has a way huger ratio of electric and diesel locos than it does steam throughout the country. So, being the steam loco fan that I am, I'm gonna talk mostly of the steam engines. However, I will acknowledge the electrics and diesels with how splendidly they handle their respective trains, with passengers and or freight. The electrics were at first imported from places like the UK or Switzerland before starting to being built in India by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works in the 60s. I hope I'm saying that name right. Some Indian builds I admire are the WAG-12B and the WAP-7. The former has some nice blue paint. Some diesels that run or have ran are imports from Britain, America, or elsewhere, but the first official Indian-built diesels rolled out in the 60s. The electrics have been more wonderfully modernized now, with higher power and greater efficiency, and thanks to indigenous tech, diesels can now be converted into electric. The steamers, meanwhile, had around a total of 8,000 or so of them working in India through the decades. While India has had their own built locos, including the F734 and some class members of the WG, WL, and YG classes, a majority of others were built from other countries specifically for IR, most from either Britain, America, or even Canada. The steam locos were especially operated from IR's early days to World War II era. However, over the century, with the replacement of electric and later diesel, they were either scrapped, lost, or sent to many museums for display. For the record, I want to talk about the top steam locos that stand out to me because, hot damn, are the colorful designs and decor just eye candy to look at. For starters, the Fairy Queen. Aside from being the oldest working steam engine in the world, it was transported to India from Britain where it was built by Kinson Thompson and Hewitson in the 1850s. It formerly operated on the Eastern India Railway and now pulls heritage trains from Delhi to Haryana. Y'all, it's the Golden Star assets on the front and the crown on the funnel for me. Just such a gorgeous vibe to look at. You may also recognize this engine as Rajiv from TNF, sharing the same gold detail and all. Another is 282 Mikado Type number 179A, built by Baldwin Works in America in the 1940s. It worked on the Northeast Frontier Railway during its life. It has now been restored and is on display at the new Jalpaiguri railway station. Again, I hope I'm saying that right. At one point, it was decorated with strings of yellow beads, which just looks so breathtaking. Then there's HPS number 24467, built in 1950 in Britain by Vulcan Foundry. Operating as former number 7776 on the EIR, it's now on display at the National Railway Museum in New Delhi. This one stands out to me because at one point it had a cute little heart design in the smokebox door. Why they removed it, I have no idea. Number 7200, or Azad, was also built by Baldwin Works in the 40s. It spent its life hauling prestigious and historic mail trains. Several of these classes were built across many countries before being built by India itself at Chittaranjan Works. As of today, 7200 has been restored to working order and runs tourist trains for Delhi's National Railway Museum. Besides the cool green and red livery detail and the iconic star on its round smokebox, I like how its name is Indian for independent, a really badass title. Class YG Mikado Type number 3438, or Sultan, built in 62, is another favorite, for I admire her queenly appearance pulling the Royal Orient Express with fellow class member 3415, who I also like. Finally, there's the X-Class locos from the Nilgiri Mountain Railway under the SR. Upon first seeing their design, I've always digged their unique wheel and cylinder arrangement. They were first built by Swiss Works in Switzerland between 1914 and 1952 or so, with newer members being built in India between 2011 and 2022. One example, number 37385, is on display at Delhi. These engines are quite well known in Bollywood media for being featured in the music video Chaiya Chaiya. And of course, we recognize them as the class for our girl Ashima from TNF. Man, her pink floral livery they made her in will never not be beautiful. In my opinion, it's a real shame electric and diesel locos tend to overshadow the history and existence of steam engines in India, for the ones that are still around have not only contributed greatly to Indian Railway's history, but their designs and majestic elements blesses the eyes of anyone that is witness to them. In conclusion, Indian Railways has quite the intriguing and amazing history going on about it. And despite being mostly electric and diesel operated, the many railways and divisions that go on throughout it are impressively beneficial by performing high quality services, whether mostly passenger or sometimes freight, that keep the network standing strong on its feet. The many zonal railways are some of the hardest working railways out there, with the increasing and well-deserved popularity to not just the people of India, but loads of people worldwide being note of that. And it's nice to see that the well-earned support proceeds to grow as time goes on. They are all a big credit to railway culture. As for the locos, come steam, electric, or diesel, they have all played an important role to being reliable and really useful as preserving machines within Indian Railways' system. And some of these steam relics themselves definitely deserve more attention, as, like I said, they are visually impressive to glance at. I shall indeed need to visit them in person someday. My final statement, Indian Railways absolutely deserves its title as the fourth largest international rail network, for it does not, and in future will not, disappoint at being dependable to the huge number of people and freight industries everywhere, not just in India, but the entire world. If you're one who likes to travel to different foreign railways, I say visit them if you can, whether it be traveling in general or checking out their lovely historic locos. Gain a glimpse and an experience at their fine rail universe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.